But you, Daniel, here's what I want you to do. Seal up the book. Close the words, seal up the book until, listen, the time of the end. Many will run to and fro at the end, and knowledge will increase. Great light will come as the book of Daniel is unsealed. And you know what? God will never do anything without a warning. According to the prophet Amos, it declares, surely the God of Israel will do nothing unless he reveals his secrets to his servants, the prophets. God will never do anything without a warning. He will show you things to come so you will not be caught off of guard. So according to the book, at the end, those who understand among the people will instruct many. None of the wicked will understand, but the wise will understand. It says here, I saw in a vision, and it so happened, I was looking and I was in Shushan in the citadel, which is a province of Elam. Now, then he declared, I was in vision, I was in the province of Elam when I was placed by a certain river, and he said, I was beside the river Ulai. Friends, there is no reason that we can even guess about this, where this river is. It's noted in historical fact, and by encyclopedias and other confirmations, we know exactly where this river is. And according to a biblical encyclopedia, we discover where this exact location is, where Daniel was in Shushan in the province of Elam and placed at a specific geographical location. According to the biblical explanation, the Ulai, ancient Ulai, is a river in, listen, Iran, where the Tigris and Euphrates join together at the confluence of these two rivers. Very near the Iran and Iraq border is where Daniel stood in vision, and he sees a ram in this particular vision. The ancient Ulai is the Karun River, the Persian Rudi Karun, the ancient Ulai, which is a tributary that comes into the confluence of the Tigris and Euphrates, and then that riverway, the Shatt-al-Arab waterway, which is the most important waterway that goes into the Persian Gulf, is where Daniel stood in vision and saw this ram. Let's take a look again at the vision. He said, I saw a ram which had two horns in front of the river. He was standing there at that river, so there's no room for guessing. We know exactly where it is, right there in the middle of Iran and Iraq was where this ram was standing. Then he goes on to continue. A ram which had two horns, and two horns were high. One horn was higher than the other, and a higher horn came up last, indicative that there were two countries that were to focus here. One begins rattle and rolling, and then another country comes in after the fact, which is a larger and greater nation.
Overseas growing concerns of the United States-Iran proxy war in Yemen. Iran now deploying warships to the Gulf of Aden, one of the most important shipping routes in the world. And this move comes just days after the U.S. retaliated against Houthi rebels in Yemen who had fired missiles at a U.S. Navy ship.
I cannot help asking those who have caused this situation, do you realize now what you've done?
It's only you that they tell these fables and you buy it and spread it to the citizens of your countries. Your people do not feel a sense of the impending danger. This is what worries me. How do you not understand that the world is being pulled in an irreversible direction? That is the problem. But they pretend like nothing's going on. I don't even know how to get through to you people anymore.
Iran has established a military presence off Yemen's coast, just hours after Washington carried out its first direct strikes against Houthi forces. The U.S. fired Tomahawk missiles from a warship in the Red Sea. We can just see over to the west over here, while the Saudi-led coalition is bombing Houthi positions from the air. And here are some of their American-made military jets. Now, Tehran has now entered the fray and sent its warships to this volatile area right down here on the southern coast, reportedly to protect vessels from piracy.
Then we see the ram doing something. The prophet Daniel declares, I saw the ram budding. He's budding three directions. He's butting west, he's butting north, and he's butting south. He's not butting east. I think that is even more significant as we look at the details and specifics of this prophecy.
Russia came out in the Moscow Times. It was in Yahoo News, Associated Press, Daily Caller, you name it, stating any aircraft entering Syrian airspace that's not authorized by the Syrian government and the Russians who were invited in will be shot down.
Iran, after having plane loads of cash and sanctions lifted, is playing its hand. Washington Free Beacon reported the Obama administration misled journalists and lawmakers for more than 9 months about a secret agreement to lift international sanctions on a critical funding node of Iran's ballistic missile program as part of a broader ransom package earlier this year that involved Iran freeing several U.S. hostages, according to U.S. officials and congressional sources apprised of the situation. Breitbart wrote in a speech delivered last month in Tehran and translated this week by the Middle East Media Research Institute, Mohsen Rafidoost, who was minister of the IRGC during the 1980s and the Iran-Iraq War, added that IRGC ground forces are 5 times better than the U.S. Army, saying, despite all the enemy media and cultural propaganda against us, if America wants to try its luck against us, it should know that we are completely capable of mobilizing 9 million fighters.
And according to the prophet, it was bullying, and no one could do anything with this ram, but just stand there. No one was able to do anything. But then the prophet sees another entity coming into the picture when this ram begins to bully. The prophet saw the entity of a power from the west. And let's look at it. Suddenly, a he-goat came from the west over the face of the whole earth. Please do not miss this.
I want to be clear to those who try to oppose the United States. I want to be clear to those who wish to do us harm. We'll stop you, and we will beat you harder than you've ever been beaten before. Make no mistake about that. Other countries, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, went to school on us in hopes of defeating us at some point in the future.
These specifics are very incredible, powerful prophecies that point to our day. I haven't said a thing about who I thought these particular entities were. I'm just sharing with you the prophecies. So when the ram begins to bully, then the prophet sees this goat come across the surface of the whole earth from the west. And then he adds additional information on it. But for geographical purposes, let's look at this map here. Here in this map, we see an X by the Ulai River where Daniel was standing at the river and where the ram was pushing. And then he sees this goat come across the surface of the whole earth from the west. Please pay close attention to the specifics. Then he declared that this goat came across the surface of the earth from the west and did not touch the ground. Apparently, the prophet sees this goat attack from the air. He's coming from the west. And keep in mind, there was no such thing as an airplane back in that day, but he sees this goat coming from the air. I also think that is very, very important. And now, let's look at another specific. The goat had a notable horn between its eyes. Not only is the location of the ram identified, but Daniel puts a lot of emphasis on this goat's forehead and this great horn that is leading the way. He specifies the reason for this goat's involvement in this next verse. In Daniel 8 and verse 6, he says, something that the ram does infuriates this goat to come across, and notice enough, to come across the surface of the whole earth from the west. And it says, he came to the ram, which had 2 horns, and which he saw standing before the river, and he ran at him with furious power. So what happens here, whatever this ram does, pisses off this goat from across the surface of the whole earth from the west with his great horn.
Washington has threatened to impose costs on Russia outside the UN over the Syrian conflict. It may mark the starkest warning so far from America, which has been ramping up anti-Russian rhetoric in recent weeks, moving swiftly from criticism to direct threats.
I listened to my colleague from Russia, and I sort of felt a little bit like we're sort of in a parallel universe here.
What Russia is sponsoring and doing is not counterterrorism, it is barbarism.
In this case, I wouldn't rule out multilateral efforts outside of the UN to impose costs on Syria or Russia or others with regard to the situation inside of Syria.
Extremist groups will continue to exploit the vacuums that are there in Syria to expand their operations, which will include, no question, attacks against Russian interests, perhaps even Russian cities. And Russia will continue to send troops home in body bags.
So how did it get this bad?
The next shock group here is the fighting against the regional peer military powers. These are existential for us and our allies. The threat for this type of a fight is a nation state with modern capabilities, aggressive behavior, and engaging in militarized competition. So who would you pick for that one? I think it would be Russia.
I want to be clear to those who wish to do us harm. We'll stop you, and we will beat you harder than you've ever been beaten before.
One of Vladimir Putin's most powerful supporters, a man who just won big in a parliamentary election in Russia, makes a menacing prediction. Vladimir Zhirinovsky, an ultra-nationalist firebrand who now leads Russia's third biggest party, warns Americans about their votes.
They're voting for peace on planet Earth if they vote for Trump. But if they vote for Hillary, it's war.
Zhirinovsky says Hillary Clinton, quote, craves power, that she'd create panic if elected. Then he goes even further.
If Hillary Clinton wins, it will be the last U.S. president ever.
And according to the prophet, when the goat confronts the ram, it says that I saw him confronting the ram and he was moved, listen, with rage. So evidently, this goat is really mad at something this bully is doing over there in between Iraq and Iran. And then when he confronts the ram, he breaks both the horns off of the ram. Now notice again the word rage. What did the ram do that brought so much anger from this goat that would bring him all the way from across the surface of the whole earth from the west? I believe that something this ram is doing really makes the goat mad. And so after the goat stomps on the ram and leaves him powerless, let's look at what it says. There was no power in the ram to withstand him. So this goat was evidently a lot stronger than the ram with two horns. And he cast the ram to the ground and trampled on him, and there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. Apparently, whoever this goat is was a very, very strong entity, and nothing could be done with this goat in this conflict. And so, according to the prophet, then the male goat, after winning the war, magnifies himself exceedingly. All of a sudden, the goat gets real puffed up with this great horn, and then the prophet says, all of a sudden, after this goat brags and wins this war, then the prophet says, this great horn broke. I'm not going to tell you what I think happened here, but you'll see before this seminar is all over. Therefore, the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, all of a sudden the prophet says, the large horn was broken. And in its place, 4 notable ones, or very significant kingdoms, come out of the breaking of this great horn, toward the 4 winds of heaven. When this great horn breaks, the whole world is going to take notice, and it's going to affect the whole world because it goes toward the 4 winds of the earth. I might add that in Gabriel's interpretation, there's much more to this vision, but for this presentation's sake, we're going to deal specifically with this particular prophecy.
Mounting tensions with possible nuclear outcomes are worldwide. We are sliding into a new Cold War with Russia as Russia ships new anti-missile systems into Syria. This after Russia held a nuclear war exercise of 40 million Russians, mobilizing 200,000 emergency services and soldiers and 50,000 pieces of equipment.